All right, listen up, you beautiful disasters. Yeah, I'm talking to you. You sitting there with that mix of exhaustion and fire in your eyes. The kind of look people get when they've been through way too much and somehow still woke up hungry for more. Now, let's talk about something they didn't expect you to survive. They ran a full background check on you. Not a casual glance, not a little Google search, no. They went deep. They dug into your history like they were mining for diamonds, called every name they could find, pulled every file, flipped every page, interrogated every witness who ever crossed your path, and every single one said the exact same thing about you. But here's the twist they didn't see coming. They thought those witnesses were gonna tear you apart. They thought someone would spill some secret flaw, some shameful moment that would finally make you look small. Instead, every witness told them the one truth: you've been too humble, too tired, too distracted to even realize about yourself. You don't break, and that's what's been haunting them. See, people act like your file is gonna expose some weakness, some crack in your armor. But the deeper they dig into your story, the more they start to understand something that terrifies them. You should have folded. You should have quit. You should have disappeared a long time ago. But you didn't. They couldn't find a single person who ever saw you stay down. Plenty saw you fall. Because life's been throwing punches at you like it's trying to win a championship belt. But nobody, not a single witness they called, could say you didn't get back up. And that's the part that really gets them sweating. Because when they ran that background check, they weren't just looking for facts. They were looking for proof. Proof that you're overrated, that your confidence is just noise, that your progress is fake, that your rise is luck. But all they found was consistency. Every name they called gave them the same story. Yeah, that one. They survive everything. And the Joker in me, the part of me that loves chaos, loves irony, loves poetic justice, can't help but laugh at how poetic this is. Because people like you make the world uncomfortable. You walk into rooms with trauma in your veins and steel in your spine, and people don't know whether to fear you, respect you, or try to copy you. But they always study you. And when they ran that check, when they called those names, when they dug into your past, they found something they never expected. You don't just survive storms. You build muscle in them. You don't crumble under pressure. You transform in it. You don't wait for approval. You set your own timestamp on destiny. And it's kinda funny. Because the whole time they were researching you, they thought the witnesses were gonna expose your damage. But instead, the witnesses exposed your pattern. A pattern of showing up when you're exhausted. A pattern of fighting when you're cornered. A pattern of rebuilding when everyone counted you out. A pattern of being the last one standing, even when you were the first one hit. You're the type of person who walks through hell and comes out carrying souvenirs. And people don't know how to process that. They think resilience is an aesthetic. You know, rise and grind, hustle culture, little catchy quotes for social media. But you lived it, you bled it, you paid for it in full. You're not motivational, you're historical. And when the investigators looked at your story, they realized something they can't unsee now. Your enemies have had more access to you than reasons to defeat you. And yet here you are. Your name doesn't ring bells. It shakes rooms. Your reputation isn't built on words. It's built on endurance. Your witnesses didn't describe a fragile person. They described a force. And honestly, I don't think you even understand the size of the shadow you cast. Because you're still living like the world can stop you when the world has already confirmed it can't. They tried to find a reason to doubt you, to dismiss you, to minimize you, to discredit you. But every single voice they contacted ended up delivering the same message. That one, they get back up every time, every single time. And that's why they're watching you now, studying you, trying to predict your moves, trying to calculate the shape of your next chapter. Because once people realize you're unstoppable, they stop trying to control you and start trying to understand you. They thought your file would end you, but instead, it validated you, confirmed you, stamped you. You became undeniable in a world that hates anything it can't break. Every name they called told them the truth you've been too busy surviving. To say out loud, you're not just built different. You're built after everything failed to destroy you. And that's why right now, you should feel that fire lighting up inside you. Because the world finally has the evidence of something you've known in your bones this whole time. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to outlast. And it's wild because you've been walking around thinking your story was something people whispered about in pity, when in reality, they've been whispering in awe. Like, yeah, we've seen what they've been through, and somehow they're still here, still moving, still terrifyingly focused. And that consistency, it messes with people's heads on a level they don't admit out loud. Every witness they spoke to didn't just react to your past. They reacted to your pattern, your energy, that strange combination of pain and persistence that always pushes you back onto your feet when life tries to sit you down. And you've got this thing, this unnerving thing, where your scars don't shrink you, they sharpen you. People don't get how someone can be wounded and dangerous at the same time. It makes them uncomfortable because they can't calculate someone who's not playing for validation, but playing for evolution. You're the type of person who hears, "That should have broken you," and responds with, "Yeah, but it didn't." And that's the exact line every witness echoed back. Like they weren't describing a person. They were describing a phenomenon. Someone who takes every hit like it's a message, not a limit. Someone who keeps reinventing themselves in ways that don't even make logical sense to the outside world. There's this quiet rumor that follows people like you. Not a scandal, not gossip, not some messy little detail. No, it's the rumor that you're the one who always figures it out. The one who adapts under pressure, who strategizes under chaos, who somehow, turns the wrong environment into the right fuel. And that reputation, it spreads faster than your pain ever did. It's funny because the people running that check thought they were uncovering dirt, but all they ended up uncovering was this uncomfortable truth. Every person they questioned had seen you hit a wall, and every person had seen you refuse to stay there. You've got witnesses who watched you lose everything and somehow rebuild without an instruction manual. Witnesses who saw you scream into the void, then walk out like the void blinked first. Witnesses who saw you walk through moments that should have ended your story, and instead watched you rewrite the script like you were allergic to quitting. And the thing that really gets them, nobody had a different version of you. Nobody described you as the type who folds or fades or gets swallowed by their setbacks. Everyone's story lined up like they were reading from the same damn script. A script you didn't even write intentionally. A script written by your survival instincts, by your persistence, by the way you always drag yourself forward even when your legs are shaking. You're living proof that consistency doesn't come from luxury. It comes from surviving battles people didn't even know you were fighting. And the investigators, they're confused because people aren't supposed to be this durable. People aren't supposed to take this many hits without becoming bitter or broken or boring. But you never turned bitter. You turned sharp. You never turned broken. You turned strategic. You never turned boring. You turned unpredictable. And unpredictable people, they scare the system. They scare the watchers, the doubters, the ones who tried to measure you, the ones who thought you were just a phase or a cautionary tale or a statistic waiting to happen. But then they saw your file and heard all those voices saying the same exact thing. Yeah, they fall, but they don't stay there. It's like the universe kept throwing you into situations meant to silence you. And each time you walked out louder than before, not loud in volume, loud in presence, loud in impact, loud in the way people mention your name with a tone that says, I don't know how they're still going, but they are. You've become the kind of person people talk about when they're explaining resilience, and they don't even realize they're referencing your blueprint. Because you didn't just survive what happened to you. You adapted, you evolved, you stretched, you recalibrated in real time. And every witness had a front row seat to your transformation, which is why none of them hesitated when they spoke on your name. Their voices aligned because your pattern is undeniable. Your history is loud. Your resilience is recorded. Your growth is documented in the eyes of everyone who's watched you push through things that would have broken someone with half your heart. And the investigators heard it in every tone, every testimony, every repeated line. This strange, chilling affirmation that you're not the kind of person life defeats. You're the kind of person life keeps throwing challenges at because you keep proving you can handle them. It spreads. It shifts the temperature of every room you walk into. It makes doubters reconsider, and it makes believers stand a little straighter. And without even realizing it, you've built a reputation that follows you louder than any rumor ever could. A reputation that they can hear in every witness's voice. A reputation that makes people rethink the way they underestimated you. A reputation that keeps growing every time you rise again without asking for applause. And it's kinda crazy because while they were piecing together your entire history, trying to map out every decision you ever made, they started realizing this weird pattern nobody warned them about. A pattern where every setback you faced ended up becoming part of your training. A pattern where every betrayal sharpened your instinct. A pattern where every loss gave you another angle, another lesson, another reason to walk with that heavy, unexplainable confidence you carry around, even on the days you feel like you're falling apart. And, you can tell it messed with them because people like you aren't supposed to exist in theory. People who get hit like you did usually stay down long enough to be counted out. But you, every witness they spoke to, was basically saying the same thing without even realizing it. That you've been playing the long game your whole life without ever announcing it. It's like you've been waking up every day with this quiet mission inside you. Something you never explained to anyone. Something that kept you grinding even when you were tired of being tired. And each person they called had seen a different chapter of that mission. The version of you that was broke but still trying. The version of you that was heartbroken but still planning. The version of you that was doubted but still moving. The version of you that was overlooked but still refusing to shrink. And the investigators kept expecting the stories to contradict each other. Like someone would finally say, "Nah, they're weak." Or, yeah, they quit, or they don't handle pressure well. But every voice was consistent. Every person gave them the same uncomfortable realization. You were built in chaos, trained in adversity, shaped by storms people don't even know the names of. Which means you don't respond to life like someone who's confused. You respond like someone who's been preparing. And that's the part that freaks people out. Because when they look at you, they expect someone who's wounded, hesitant, second-guessing themselves. But that's never been your story. You walk with this, I've seen worse energy that you don't even notice anymore, and that energy, it exposes people. It forces them to look at their own excuses, their own softness, their own fear of discomfort. Because you've been dragged through moments that were designed to end you. But instead of breaking you, those moments stretched you, pulled out parts of your character you didn't know you had, brought out a version of you that doesn't scare easily anymore. And the witnesses, they've all seen you in your rawest form. Not the Instagram version of you, not the I'm fine version, but the version that was exhausted, overwhelmed, cornered, tested, the version of you that had every reason to collapse but didn't. That's why each testimony lined up like a chorus. Not because they practiced, not because they coordinated, but because your resilience has been the same across every season of your life. You stayed consistent in moments where most people switch up. You kept showing up in moments where others disappear. You pushed forward in moments where the average person folds. And when they reviewed those statements, it started hitting them that your strength wasn't an act. It was a habit, a reflex, a way of living you didn't choose out of pride, but out of survival. You became good at enduring because you didn't have the luxury of quitting. You became strategic because randomness kept hurting you. You became wise because mistakes were expensive. You became resilient because collapse was never an option you could afford. People don't see the cost of that. They just see the outcome. They see the way you walk now. Not because you're arrogant, but because you've earned your confidence the hard way. And while they were digging into your story, they accidentally uncovered the one thing you never broadcast, but always embodied. That your strength isn't loud, it's layered. It's built from 1,000 quiet moments where you could have chosen differently but didn't. Where you could have stayed on the ground but didn't. Where you could have believed what people said about you but didn't. Your witnesses weren't describing a miracle. They were describing a pattern of someone who refuses to stay the version life tried to reduce them to. Someone who evolves mid-pain. Someone who adapts mid-chapter. Someone who grows mid-chaos. And the investigators could hear it in every account. This strange, consistent tone of respect, shock, disbelief, admiration, whatever you want to call it. Because every person has watched you survive something that should have taken you out permanently. There aren't many people who can walk through that kind of fire and come out with their identity intact, their heart still open, their ambition still alive, their spirit still loud. But you did, and they heard it from everyone they contacted. This unshakable truth that your life hasn't been easy, but your response to it has been extraordinary. And it hits different when you realize they weren't just hearing stories about you. They were hearing people try to explain something they still don't fully understand. That's why their voices all had that same undertone, that mix of, yeah, I saw them go through hell, and I still don't know how they walked out of it like that. You've got this vibe where people can't tell if you're lucky or cursed, blessed or battle-scarred, chosen or just stubborn as hell. And, that duality makes you unpredictable in a way the world isn't used to. Because most people only survive when circumstances are gentle. You survived when they were violent. Most people rise when the timing is perfect. You rose in moments that were trying to bury you alive. And the investigators kept hearing that same pattern, that same uncomfortable truth, that all your turning points happened under pressure, all your evolution happened in the dark, all your growth happened in chapters nobody clapped for. It wasn't the glamorous kind of resilience, not the motivational poster type. It was the gritty, lonely, confusing kind, where you had to hype yourself up in rooms where nobody believed in you. People don't realize how many times you had to restart with nothing but your own stubborn willpower holding you together. They don't realize how many nights you had to talk yourself into getting up the next morning. They don't realize how many moments you sat with fear and kept moving anyway. And each witness had a different angle on those experiences, but all of them pointed to the same thing: that your survival hasn't been accidental or aesthetic. It's been intentional. A daily decision. A repeated choice to keep going when giving up would have been way easier, way quieter, way normal. Hey, you listening? Good. Because, what I'm about to say isn't for the faint-hearted. It's for you. The one whose protection status just got bumped to level 9 priority. Yeah, level 9. The kind of classification that makes people lose sleep, double-check doors, and pretend they're not watching you when, trust me, they've been watching you for a long time. Let's talk about why they can't relax now. You, with the nerve to survive everything they whispered behind your back. You, with the audacity to keep rising when every statistic, every rumor, every little situation said you were supposed to fold. And I know what you're thinking. Why me? Why all this attention? Why the pressure? Because you're not regular. You never were. And the system finally caught up to that. See, level 9. Priority isn't just some digital stamp or secret code in a dusty file. It means your name started causing activity, sirens, alerts, quiet conversations in locked rooms. It means every move you make sends ripple effects through circles you don't even realize you're influencing. And, let's be honest, the world loves to pretend it doesn't notice people like you until it has no choice but to act. You ever notice how they suddenly get awkward around you? How they start over-explaining themselves? How they monitor your tone, your presence, your potential? That's not coincidence. That's fear. Pure, unfiltered, cold sweat fear of what happens if you finally understand who you are. And worse, who you could become if you stop holding back. Because you have this unpredictable aura. Not chaotic in the out-of-control sense, but chaotic in the you don't move like the rest of them kind of way. And people hate what they can't predict. People get nervous when they can't label you. And when they can't control you, they classify you level 9 priority. And look, I'm gonna break this down so it's real. Not some dramatic headline floating on a screen. They can't relax now because you're evolving fast. You're not who you were last month, last year, last decade. You're operating with new information, new scars, new clarity, and that makes you dangerous to anyone who benefited from the old you, the one who stayed quiet, played small, apologized for taking up space, tried to fit into rooms built for insecure people who couldn't handle your confidence. You ever notice how people switch up when you stop doubting yourself? Yeah, that. They don't want you grounded. They don't want you calm. They don't want you strategic. Because when you're strategic, you're lethal. And when you're calm, you're unstoppable. And when you stop letting the world tell its story about you, and you start telling your own, oh, they hate that. They absolutely hate that. You're not fragile. You're focused. You're not confused. You're calculating. You're not isolated. You're selective. And, that shift alone terrifies the people who once relied on your uncertainty. They can't relax now because you're no longer reacting. You're initiating. You're no longer explaining. You're executing. You're no longer waiting for approval. You're outgrowing the entire ecosystem. Understand this. When your protection status gets upgraded, it's because the system detects motion. Dangerous, exponential, unpredictable motion. Your growth looks like a threat. Your clarity looks like a weapon. Your self-respect looks like rebellion. Your resilience, a whole red flag to people who counted on you staying broken. And, let me tell you something a little uncomfortable. Some of the people who can't relax aren't enemies. They're the ones who underestimated you, the ones who thought they could shape you, the ones who thought you'd never outgrow their version of you. They can't relax because your evolution exposes everything they hid behind. Their ego, their arrogance, their subtle little manipulations, their quiet hopes. You'd never realize you deserved more. But look at you, realizing, rebuilding, rewriting. And I know it gets heavy. I know you get tired. I know some nights you sit there like, why does it feel like I'm carrying a storm on my back? Because you are. Because you carry power you haven't even fully accessed yet. Because you disturb environments without even speaking. Because your silence gets treated like a warning. Because your presence alone exposes every insecurity in the room. They can't relax because you're unpredictable. Not in the reckless sense, but in the potential sense. And potential, real potential. The kind that grows in dark seasons and sharpens through pain. That kind scares the hell out of people. You don't crumble under pressure. You convert it. You don't avoid the fire. You walk into it and come back with information. And, nobody knows what you're planning next. Not because you're secretive, but because you finally learned to stop announcing things to people who root for your failure in private. Level 9. Priority means you're no longer ignorable. Not by them, not by the world, not by the universe, not by the people who once acted like your presence was optional. You became a variable, a wild card, a glitch in their prediction model, a name they can't get out of their system because every time they think you've reached your limit, you rewrite the limit. And here's the part that really gets them shaking. You're not even at your peak yet. You're still warming up. You're still figuring out the edges of your own power. You're still discovering pieces of yourself that were buried under years of doubt, guilt, trauma, silence, and survival. You are not the threat they expected. You're the threat they created, and the threat they can't undo. You're the proof that people can take everything from you, and you'll still come back sharper. You're the reminder that you don't need permission to rebuild your life. You're the example of what happens when someone realizes they're allowed to outgrow the story they were handed. That's why they can't relax now. Not because you're reckless, not because you're loud, not because you're unstable, but because you're awake. And you stopped waiting for someone to validate your evolution. They can't relax because you have something they don't. Consciousness, depth, self-awareness, discipline, vision, resilience, and a willingness to walk alone if the alternative is shrinking yourself for the comfort of mediocre minds. You became a hazard to false narratives, a danger to low expectations, a disruption to the people who tried to limit you, a nightmare to anyone who thought you'd stay predictable. This is level 9. Priority. And you earned it through every scar, every comeback, every silent rebuild, every moment you refused to break when breaking would have been easier. Every time you walked away from chaos instead of becoming it, every time you decided you were done being who they wanted and started being who you were meant to be. And the wildest part is, you don't even realize the full weight of what you've stepped into yet. Because once you hit level 9, priority, everything about the way the world interacts with you shifts, whether you ask for it or not. People start studying you like you're a case file. Not because you did something wrong, but because your existence disrupts their comfort zones just by being authentic in ways they don't know how to handle. You ever feel how the room changes when you walk in? That tiny pause, that subtle silence, that weird little energy shift where everyone suddenly becomes aware of themselves. That's not imagination. That's the surveillance instinct kicking in. People scan you because they can't anticipate your direction anymore. You stopped being background noise the moment you stopped betraying yourself to fit their version of the world. And it unnerves them because you operate with this clarity now, this sharpness that didn't exist back when you were trying to keep the peace, explain your worth, or negotiate your dignity. You don't negotiate your dignity anymore, and that strips power from everyone who built their confidence on your insecurities. Your silence hits different now. Your presence hits different now. Your absence hits even harder. People feel you whether you're there or not, and that's the kind of thing nobody can relax around because it breaks the illusion that they had control over your narrative. That level 9 tag didn't come from nowhere. It came from patterns. Patterns in how you survive, adapt, and keep pushing even when everything around you says, stop. Most people break once. You broke and rebuilt. You broke again and reconstructed your psychology, and then you walked back into the world with a face that made it look like nothing happened because your spirit refused to broadcast your suffering just to earn sympathy. And that's rare. People don't know what to do with rare. Rare scares them because rare is unpredictable. You became the type of person who can't be measured with shallow metrics, and those are the people institutions watch the closest. Not because of danger, but because of potential. Real potential. The kind that can't be mapped, controlled, or neatly boxed. They sense something in you that they can't quite decode. This shift in your posture, this awareness in your eyes, this calmness in your reactions, this refusal to over-explain, this ability to read a room like the room owes you answers. You're operating like someone who finally knows the cost of their peace and refuses to hand it out like a coupon. And that sends shockwaves through every insecure person who benefited from your old patterns. Your growth started exposing their stagnation. Your healing started highlighting their toxicity. Your elevation started triggering their unprocessed wounds. People don't get uncomfortable because you changed. They get uncomfortable because your change reminds them they didn't. And, when you carry that kind of reflective power, people become hyper-aware around you. They watch you like you're unpredictable, even when you're quiet, and they study you like you're planning something, even when you're just existing. Not because you're suspicious, but because they know what someone with your level of awakening is capable of, and they know they can't manipulate that. Your energy is not easy to lie to anymore. Your intuition is louder, your boundaries are firmer, your standards are higher, your patience is shorter, your vision is clearer, and your tolerance for disrespect is basically non-existent, which means the people who once got away with microaggressions, guilt trips, silent punishments, emotional manipulation, subtle competition, and quiet envy, can't breathe comfortably around you anymore. They feel exposed around you. Not because you say anything, but because your presence alone acts like a mirror reflecting everything they tried to hide from themselves. That's why they can't relax. People don't relax around mirrors that show truth. You used to dim your light to keep the peace, but after everything you went through, you realized keeping the peace with others was destroying the peace inside you. And once you flipped that switch, once you started prioritizing your mental structure, emotional clarity, and spiritual safety, you became someone who can't be molded by social pressure, public opinion, or familiar guilt trips. And that's exactly what level 9 priority signals. You're not someone who blends into the environment anymore. You're someone who alters the environment. People make different choices when you're around. They speak differently. They stand differently. They think differently. Not because you're intimidating on purpose, but because your existence disrupts everything they pretended not to be. You grew into someone whose peace looks like power and whose wounds look like wisdom and whose presence feels like a psychological audit. And the truth is, most people aren't prepared to be that honest with themselves. You started carrying yourself like someone who knows they survived things others wouldn't even talk about, and that kind of grounded confidence, that calm, steady, unshakable confidence, forces people to reassess themselves when they stand next to you. People can't relax when they're busy comparing themselves to the version of you they never thought you'd reach. You're operating with a level of internal discipline that people can sense, even if they can't articulate it. You walk different. You decide different. You recover different. You move like someone who's done being misunderstood and is finally ready to be undeniable. And, the world notices that. The people who doubted you notice that. The people who underestimated you notice that. The people who benefited from your silence notice that. Because you're not silent anymore. Not in volume, but in certainty. You don't plead your worth, you demonstrate it simply by existing, and that creates an internal earthquake in anyone who thought you'd never make it. This far, keep going exactly as you are, with that quiet intensity, that unfiltered self-respect, that sharp awareness, that unwillingness to shrink. Because every step you take in this version of yourself amplifies the tremors you leave in the minds of the people who never expected you to evolve this deeply. And, the deeper you step into this version of yourself, the more you start noticing how people react before they even say anything. Their eyes dart a little. Their voice shifts a little. Their posture adjusts like they're bracing for something they can't even name. That's because level 9 priority energy changes the air around you. It's that kind of presence that makes people check their own intentions before approaching you. Like they know deep down you can read the truth behind their tone before they finish a sentence. And you don't even try to do that. It's just who you've become. Someone who can't be fooled by fake apologies, recycled excuses, or that subtle shape-shifting people do when they're uncomfortable with your growth. You're tuned into vibrations that most people ignore. You move by instinct now, and your instinct is sharper than their masks can handle. People can't relax around someone whose intuition hits like a spotlight. You know what else changed? You stopped giving out your emotional password to anyone who asked. You stopped being accessible to people who only valued you. When you dimmed yourself. And once you stopped doing that, once you started choosing peace over attention, healing over chaos, standards over familiarity. You became harder to manipulate, harder to guilt trip, harder to distract, harder to predict. And that's exactly why they feel the pressure. Because the moment you started acting like your life actually mattered, the people who expected you to betray your own needs felt displaced. Your evolution didn't just upgrade you, it exposed them. Every insecurity they tried to hide, every intention they tried to soften, every motive they tried to disguise, you see right through it now. And that makes them tense, even in conversations that used to feel effortless. You ever notice how certain people don't joke the same way around you anymore? They monitor their words, they slow their tone, they check for your reaction before they finish a punchline. It's because your presence forces genuineness, and people who relied on masks aren't comfortable being genuine. You carry yourself with this calm certainty now, and that certainty challenges people who built their identities around controlling narratives. You used to be someone they could misinterpret, twist, downplay, confuse, keep small. But the person standing here, emotionally self-aware, mentally structured, spiritually steady, hard to influence, that person changed the entire dynamic. Level 9. Priority means the universe saw you stop abandoning yourself, and it responded by amplifying your protection, your intuition, your clarity. And even though you might not fully feel it, yet other people feel it deeply. They feel the shift in your boundaries. They feel the shift in your silence. They feel the shift in your expectations. They feel the shift in your energy. And that shift forces them to confront the parts of themselves they've been avoiding. Your growth has weight to it. Not the kind of weight that drags you down, the kind that presses on people who tried to carry a version of you that no longer exists. You became someone who doesn't need to shout to be heard, doesn't need to argue to be right, doesn't need to fight for validation, doesn't need to justify your evolution to people who benefited from your stagnation. And, people sense that. They sense that you don't chase anymore. They sense that you don't beg for clarity anymore. They sense that you don't tolerate breadcrumbs, half-efforts, or emotional shortcuts. You started demanding reciprocity without saying a word, and the people who were used to giving you less than you deserved feel that shift in their spine. You're harder to reach now, not because you're cold, but because you healed the parts of you that used to accept bare minimum. You're harder to influence now, not because you're stubborn, but because you see manipulation before it starts forming into words. You're harder to shake now, not because you're emotionless, but because you rebuilt your foundation on truths you earned, not illusions people tried to feed you. And when someone reaches that stage, when someone becomes that grounded in themselves, their presence becomes a psychological pressure point for everyone pretending. People can't relax when they know you're not the same person they once controlled with silence, guilt, confusion, or expectations that were never meant to benefit you. You walk around with this steady, unshakable energy, and they feel the shift like a warning in their chest. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're awakened, and awakened people change the landscape just by existing in it. And the truth is, you're still growing, still unfolding, still sharpening, still becoming more of yourself than you've ever been allowed to be. And every step you take into that identity sends a shockwave into the minds of the people who counted on you staying who you used to be. And the craziest part is that you're not even trying to shake anything up. You're just existing in this newer, clearer, more self-aware version of yourself. And that alone feels like a disturbance to people who relied on your old patterns. It's wild how your peace is loud to people who thrive on chaos. How your boundaries feel aggressive to people who are comfortable crossing them. How your confidence feels disrespectful to people who are only secure when you doubted yourself. You started moving like someone who finally understands their own value, and people pick up on that without you having to say a word. Your energy used to ask for permission, and now it just shows up like it belongs there. And that shift gets under people's skin in ways they don't know how to verbalize. They feel like you're not the same, and they can't articulate why, because everything about you is still you, just upgraded, refined, filtered, sharpened. Level 9. Priority energy isn't loud. It's unsettling in that quiet, steady way. That kind of presence that makes people think about themselves after talking to you. You say one sentence and they sit there replaying it like it was a threat when you were just being honest. You walk into a room and suddenly people straighten up like you're conducting an internal audit. People act like you're unpredictable because they finally realized they never actually knew you. They only knew the version of you that kept shrinking to survive environments you've now mentally outgrown. All right, lean in for this. Hey, yeah, you made it. And that alone already messes up their whole narrative. Good. I'm glad you're here. Because, today isn't about motivation posters or feel-good quotes. This is about receipts. This is about timing. This is about what happens when people talk way too loud about someone they thought was already dead. Listen, they really thought you were finished. Not struggling, not delayed. Finished, done, written off, chalked up as a loss. They said it casually, too, at dinners, in group chats, in voice notes they never thought would echo back. They said your name like it was already a memory, like the story was over, like you were just another lesson people whisper about to feel better about themselves. And you felt it, didn't you? That quiet pressure, that thing in your chest when you realized, oh, they want a front row seat to your collapse. They clapped when you stumbled. They called it concern. They smiled when you went silent. They called it growth. They watched you bleed in private and took notes in public. But here's the part they didn't calculate. Here's where it gets funny. You didn't disappear. You went underground. While they were busy narrating your ending, you were learning how pain actually works. You were learning how betrayal sharpens focus. You were learning that when people underestimate you, they hand you time. And time is dangerous in the hands of someone who's already been stripped of everything. You stopped explaining. You stopped defending. You stopped correcting lies because, honestly, why interrupt someone who's actively testifying against themselves? See, you thought this was about survival. But justice? Justice was clocking in quietly. Every word they used to cut you down, logged. Every exaggeration, logged. Every fake concern, every slick insult disguised as advice, every "I'm just being honest" moment, logged. They thought lies evaporate. Nah, lies age, lies rot, lies come back smelling like truth but hitting like consequence. And now they feel it. They feel that shift in the room when your name comes up and nobody laughs anymore. They feel that tension when your results don't match the version of you they sold. They feel that weird panic when they realize, wait, we spoke too soon. Because justice doesn't rush. Justice likes timing. Justice likes letting people build their own platform before it pulls the rug. You ever notice how quiet people get right before accountability shows up? That's not peace. That's fear doing math. You're not chasing revenge. You're not plotting payback. You don't even have to lift a finger. That's the part that really messes with them. You're just standing there, alive, clear-eyed, unbroken. And suddenly every lie has to explain itself. Now they're backtracking. Now it's, that's not what I meant. Now it's, you're taking it the wrong way. Now it's, we always believed in you. Liars hate momentum they don't control. See, when they talked about you, they thought words were harmless. They thought speech vanished into the air. They didn't realize words are contracts. They didn't realize statements become boomerangs when the universe decides to enforce them. Every plot they whispered behind your back. It hits them in broad daylight. Every label they tried to stick on you falls off and lands on their own reflection. Because justice doesn't scream. Justice reflects. And here you are walking proof that survival isn't loud, but consequences are. You don't have to announce your glow-up. You don't have to call anyone out. Your existence already ruined the story they needed you to stay inside. They wanted you small so they could feel tall. Now they have to look up. They wanted you broken so they could feel right. Now they have to explain why you're still standing. They wanted your silence forever. But silence was just you sharpening your aim. And the wildest part? They did all the damage themselves. You didn't expose them. You didn't retaliate. You didn't even correct the record. They built the case. Justice just picked it up. So yeah. Let them watch you rise with the same mouth they used to bury you. Let them feel that uncomfortable heat when success shows up uninvited. Let them replay their own words at 3 a.m. and wonder when exactly things went wrong. Because you already know the truth. You weren't spared. You were tested. You weren't delayed. You were prepared. And every lie they released into the world, still moving, still turning, still searching for the people who sent it out in the first place. Because here's the part they really don't talk about. The part nobody warns them about when they're busy rewriting your name like a punchline. See, justice doesn't show up wearing a cape or making announcements. It slips into the cracks of everyday life. It sits in boardrooms. It hangs out in family gatherings. It shows up as awkward pauses, missed opportunities, doors that used to swing open suddenly stuck, like they're glued shut. And the crazy thing is, you don't even have to witness it for it to work. They feel it when people stop asking their opinion. They feel it when their voice doesn't carry the same weight anymore. They feel it when influence leaks out of them slowly, drip by drip, and nobody can explain why. Because deep down, they recognize the energy shift. Not consciously, not out loud, but in that uncomfortable way you feel when you realize the story you've been telling doesn't line up with what everyone can see anymore. And you're standing there like a quiet glitch in their reality. You ever notice how people get nervous around someone they misjudged too early? They start overcompensating, talking too much, explaining things nobody asked for, bringing up old versions of you like that version is still relevant. That's panic pretending to be confidence. They don't know whether to apologize or double down. And that space right there, that hesitation, that's where justice likes to stretch its legs. Because every lie needs maintenance. Lies need repetition. Lies need backup. Lies need other people to play along. And when you quietly outgrow the lie, the whole structure starts wobbling. People ask questions. Patterns don't match. Timelines feel off. Credibility starts sweating. You can almost hear it. The mental scrambling. Wait. I thought they said you couldn't come back from that. Wait. I thought you were unstable. Wait. Weren't you supposed to disappear? Awkward. And here's the thing. They keep watching you even when they pretend they're not. Every silence from you feels loud to them. Every step forward feels personal. Every win feels like an accusation, even though you never said a word. That's the Joker part of this. That cruel irony. You didn't threaten them. You didn't confront them. You didn't post explanations or drop subtweets or gather allies. You healed in a way they can't reverse. And people hate that. They hate not having access to the version of you they could control. They hate not being able to provoke the old reactions. They hate that their old tricks don't work anymore because you're not playing the same game. They're still swinging at the air, and you're already 3 moves ahead. You see it in their eyes when they realize you're not angry. You're focused, not bitter, aware, not desperate, selective. Selective terrifies them. Because selective means intentional. Intentional means clarity. Clarity means you see exactly who said what, who stood where, who smiled while doing damage. And that memory? It's calm, it's quiet, it doesn't yell, it waits. They thought your breakdown was the headline. They didn't realize it was the origin story. They thought watching you struggle meant they were winning. They didn't realize struggle teaches patterns, exposes motives, maps out enemies without you ever having to ask. Funny how people expose themselves when they think there are no consequences. They told lies, thinking you'd never be in the room again. They didn't realize the room would eventually need you. Didn't realize your name would come up attached to survival instead of scandal, resilience instead of rumor. Didn't realize time has a sense of humor. And you? You're moving different, speaking less, observing more, smiling when necessary, silent when it matters. You're not haunted by what they said. You're informed by it. That's power. The kind of power that doesn't need validation. The kind that doesn't post wins too early. The kind that lets silence make people nervous. Because every lie they sent out is still out there, circulating, bumping into reality, struggling to defend itself without you lifting a finger. And they feel it every single day. Yeah, and that daily feeling, that low hum in their chest, that's not guilt, it's anticipation. They're waiting for something to drop, even if they don't know what it is. Because when you've told enough lies, reality starts feeling like a ticking ceiling fan that might come loose at any second. You ever notice, how people who lied about you suddenly become obsessed with timing? They start asking weird questions. How long have you been doing this? Who are you working with? When did this happen? That's not curiosity. That's surveillance anxiety. That's them realizing they lost track of you while they were busy tracking the wrong version. And you moved quietly on purpose. You didn't broadcast the rebuild. You didn't soundtrack the pain. You didn't narrate the nights where sleep didn't show up, and your thoughts went full courtroom mode. Replaying conversations, rereading text messages, hearing voices that weren't even in the room anymore. You sat through that. You processed it. You metabolized it. Most people never do. They outsource their pain. You stayed with yours. And that changes how you walk into rooms. That changes how you listen. You see motives before words finish forming. That's why their energy hits different around you. They feel exposed even when you're relaxed. They feel judged even when you're neutral. It's not because you're doing anything. It's because you can't be fooled by the mask they rehearsed for an audience that no longer believes the script. You're not intimidating. You're anchored. Anchored people don't need approval. They don't chase closure. They don't argue with projections. They let people reveal themselves at full volume. And the wild part? Justice loves witnesses who don't interfere. While you stayed quiet, they stayed sloppy. Repeating stories that didn't age well, adding details that contradicted earlier versions, forgetting who they lied to and why, assuming you were still frozen in the moment they last reduced you to a rumor. Big mistake, because growth changes posture, it sharpens memory, it rewires instinct. You started trusting that pause before responding, trusting that instinct that says something isn't clean here, trusting that discomfort is information, not weakness. They mistook your silence for confusion. It was calibration, and piece by piece you watched patterns repeat. Same tactics, different faces, same manipulation, updated language, same disrespect, disguised as humor. You clocked all of it, not with rage, with clarity. That's why their apologies feel thin. That's why their compliments sound late. That's why their sudden respect feels transactional. You're not impressed because you remember the version of them that showed up when you had nothing to offer. You remember who called, who disappeared, who watched, who participated. Memory is heavy when it's accurate. They can feel it too. They feel that they don't get to rewrite history just because you evolved. They feel that the lie they told needs forgiveness it hasn't earned. They feel that the ground is shifting and they don't know where to place their feet anymore. And you're steady, breathing, unhurried. You don't need to confront anyone. Your presence already rearranges the room. Your restraint already communicates more than any accusation ever could. Justice doesn't need your help because justice already has their words, their timing, their digital footprints, their witnesses, their patterns. You're just walking forward, unbothered on the surface, aware underneath, letting reality do its quiet, surgical work while they keep checking over their shoulder, wondering when the echo finishes chasing them through the rooms they thought were safe. Yeah, and that echo, it follows them into places they thought were neutral. Work, relationships, random conversations that suddenly feel tense for no obvious reason. It's wild how the body knows before the mind catches up. Tight jaw, short answers, that fake laugh that comes out a second too late. They're carrying the weight of unfinished business they never planned to finish. You ever see someone try to act casual while they're internally checking exits? That's them. Because when someone survives the version of the world you tried to trap them in, the script collapses, and people who live off scripts don't improvise well. You stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding. That right there shifted everything, because explanations feed narratives, and silence starves them. You didn't disappear out of weakness. You removed access. Access is power. Once they lost access, they lost leverage. Once they lost leverage, they started guessing. And guessing makes people reckless. That's when slip-ups happen. That's when stories don't align. That's when people say too much to the wrong person, at the wrong time, with the wrong confidence. Justice loves that moment. You kept receipts without screenshots. You remembered tones, timing, energy, who spoke when nobody was watching, who stayed quiet when it mattered, who benefited from misunderstanding you. That kind of data doesn't expire, and something else happened too. You stopped needing to be believed by everyone. You realized being misunderstood by people with bad intentions is actually protection. It tells you exactly who not to circle back to. They thought your isolation was punishment. It was filtration. You refined your circle during silence. You learned who recognizes growth versus who feels threatened by it. You learned who celebrates wins quietly and who waits for your failure to feel tall again. Tall people don't need stepping stones. That's why their energy around you feels off. They're talking to your old file while you're operating on a new system. They keep referencing who you were while standing in front of who you are. That lag creates panic because it exposes how outdated their information really is. Their lies were built on a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. And every time you show up grounded, clear, unreactive, it destabilizes them a little more. Not because you're trying to, but because their foundation was never solid to begin with. They expected rage. They expected explanations. They expected defensiveness. They weren't prepared for composure. Composure after betrayal feels illegal to people who expected control. You didn't forget what happened. You just stopped letting it run the show. And that's when justice leans in closer. Because justice doesn't move on emotion alone. It moves on alignment. Your alignment speaks louder than any speech. The way you choose peace without being passive. The way you assert boundaries without announcing them. The way your silence carries weight instead of absence. That's why rooms get quiet when you enter. Not because you demand attention, but because unresolved truth reacts to you like a pressure change. They sense that whatever they built on your absence can't survive your presence much longer. They sense that the same lies that once sounded convincing are starting to echo, weirdly, hollow, like a joke nobody laughs at anymore. Truth doesn't rush, but it hunts with patience. And as you keep moving, steady, intentional, unreadable, they keep miscalculating, overthinking, over-explaining, trying to stay ahead of something that's already behind them, still catching its breath, still circling, still closing in from angles they never bothered to check. Yeah, from angles they never bothered to check, because they assumed you'd stay frozen exactly where they left you. Assumptions get dangerous when the person you misjudged keeps evolving while you're stuck rehearsing an old story. You can see it in how they flinch when your name shows up unexpectedly. Not dramatic, just that brief micro-pause, that tiny recalculation, that moment where their brain goes, wait, this isn't supposed to be happening yet. Because the version of you they counted on never learned how to stand this calmly. You learned patience the hard way. You learned restraint when reacting would have felt better, but cost more. You learned how to watch situations play out without interfering, without fixing, without rescuing people from their own behavior. Most people can't do that. They rush to clear their name. They rush to correct the lie. They rush to control how they're perceived. You didn't rush. And that's why everything flipped. Because time exposes effort. Time amplifies inconsistency. Time forces people to either become honest or become frantic. And frantic people make mistakes in public. They start contradicting themselves across rooms. They forget which version they told to which person. They get irritated at questions that shouldn't be offensive. Defensive at silence that isn't even aimed at them. Insecurity always snitches on itself. Meanwhile, you're moving with that calm focus that comes from knowing exactly who you are without needing to announce it. You don't over-explain anymore. You don't overshare wins. You don't perform pain for sympathy. Everything about you says grounded, not shaken, but not naive either. That balance? Rare. They used to think they knew how to push your buttons. They don't realize the panel got rewired. The old triggers don't light up anymore. The guilt tactics fall flat. The subtle jabs float past you like background noise. And that lack of reaction, it wrecks them. Because people who lie about you rely on your response to keep the illusion alive. They need your outrage. They need your confusion. They need your breakdown to justify the narrative. Your composure stripped them of that. Silence with clarity feels like being watched, even when nobody's saying a word. They start projecting, accusing you of things you never did, assuming motives you never had, guessing alliances that don't exist. That's paranoia growing teeth, all while you're just living. Building? Choosing better conversations, choosing better rooms, choosing not to carry explanations that don't belong to you. You didn't change to confuse them. You changed to survive honestly. And honesty has gravity. Truth pulls patterns toward exposure. It pulls witnesses closer. It pulls timelines into alignment, whether people want it or not. That's why things around them start unraveling without you touching anything. Partnerships feel strained. Trust feels thin. Stories feel fragile. Because every lie has to defend itself against reality. And reality doesn't argue. It just keeps showing up. That's exhausting for people who built everything on performance. Your past performance. Your past proving. Your past being shocked by who people really are. You see them clearly without making them villains. You remember everything without carrying hatred. That emotional independence is what flips the power dynamic all the way around. They don't know how to deal with someone who remembers the truth calmly. Because calm memory doesn't fade. Calm memory doesn't distort. Calm memory doesn't need witnesses to stay real. All right. Hey. Yeah. If you're hearing this, good. That means you're still awake while everybody else is pretending. Take a breath for a second, because this isn't one of those soft talks. This is the kind you feel in your chest. Listen, someone spoke up for you. Not quietly, not behind closed doors, not in some let me clarify later way. No. In front of everyone, and the moment it happened, you felt the shift, didn't you? The room changed. The comments slowed down. The laughs got awkward. People who were real loud suddenly needed context. Suddenly people needed facts. Suddenly everybody's asking for evidence. And here's the part they don't want you to understand. The panic didn't start because you were wrong. The panic started because for the first time, the story slipped out of their control. See, you've been the quiet one. The one they assumed wouldn't be defended. The one they talked around instead of talking to. The one they underestimated because you didn't announce every move. You let people believe whatever they needed to believe to sleep at night. And, they got comfortable with that. They got comfortable thinking they were the narrator. They got comfortable rewriting your intentions. They got comfortable turning your silence into guilt. They got comfortable assuming no one important would ever say, "Hold on, that's not true." Then somebody did, and now look at them. Now they're scrambling for screenshots. Now they're checking old messages. Now they're replaying conversations, trying to remember what they actually said versus what they implied. Now they're saying things like, "Let's be fair, and we need receipts, and there are two sides." Funny how fairness only shows up when the power balance tilts, right? You need to understand something. This isn't about evidence. It was never about evidence. If it were, they would have asked for it before they judged you. This is about damage control. This is about fear. This is about people realizing the narrative they coasted on just got challenged in public. And public exposure? Oh, that hits different. Because private doubt is manageable. Public contradiction is dangerous. When someone spoke up for you in front of everyone, it did something irreversible. It planted uncertainty in people's heads. It made others start thinking, wait, what if we got this wrong? And the scariest part for them? that thought doesn't unthink itself. You didn't even have to defend yourself. You didn't have to raise your voice. You didn't have to drop proof on the table. Someone else did it for you. And that's why they're losing it. Because when an outsider defends you, it validates something they don't want validated. That you were never as weak, wrong, or clueless as they needed you to be. You were just quiet, strategic, observing. They confuse silence with submission every single time. And that's always their mistake. Now here comes the animus morphosis truth they won't say out loud. Panic doesn't look like yelling. Panic looks like sudden professionalism. Panic looks like policy. Panic looks like people pretending they're calm while desperately trying to rebuild credibility. They're not searching for evidence to expose you. They're searching for evidence to protect themselves. Because deep down, they know something already shifted. They felt it. They saw the reactions. They noticed who stopped nodding along. And you're standing there realizing something new about yourself. You survived being misunderstood. You survived being talked about. You survived being sidelined. And now you're being validated without asking. That changes the way people look at you, even the ones pretending it doesn't. Don't rush to explain yourself now. That's the trap. They want you emotional. They want you over-explaining. They want you producing proof, like you owe them something. You don't. Your existence does not require documentation. Your integrity doesn't need a presentation. Your truth doesn't need their approval. The fact that someone else spoke up means your character spoke louder than your words ever could. And here's the part that should really mess with them. You still haven't even shown your hand. They're sweating about evidence while you're standing there knowing the real power isn't what you can prove. It's what you no longer need to. See, when someone defends you publicly, it means they saw through the noise. It means you left an impression without campaigning for it. It means your consistency did what arguments never could. You didn't chase validation. Validation chased you. And now the city's nervous, not because you're loud, but because you're solid. Because people can sense when someone can't be shaken anymore. Because once the illusion cracks, everyone starts checking the foundation. And you're watching it happen in real time. The same people who dismissed you are suddenly cautious. The same voices that rushed judgment now speak slower. The same crowd that smiled when you were the target now avoids eye contact. That's not coincidence, that's consequence. So stand there, calm, controlled, slight smile if you want. Let them dig, let them scroll, let them debate. Every second they spend scrambling is proof that your presence matters more than they ever admitted. They didn't expect anyone to speak up for you. That was their last mistake, because the moment that defense landed, something else happened under the surface that nobody talks about. You felt it before they showed it. That subtle recalibration. People rewriting their internal math about you. You're watching it in their faces, the hesitation, the micro-expressions, the delayed responses. That's not confusion, that's recognition kicking in late. They started replaying every interaction they ever had with you, every joke they laughed at, every assumption they co-signed, every time they stayed quiet while your name got bent out of shape. That rewind is brutal. Because memory gets loud when guilt shows up uninvited. You're not imagining the shift. The energy around you changed because certainty got lapsed. And when certainty collapses, people reach for evidence like it's a life raft. Not because evidence matters, but because they need something tangible to cling to while their worldview wobbles. You see, the most dangerous thing in any social room isn't aggression, it's doubt. Someone defending you publicly injected doubt into a story that depended on everyone staying aligned. One voice-breaking rank is all it takes to fracture a chorus. And, they felt that fracture instantly. That's why questions started sounding different. That's why people who never checked facts suddenly want timestamps and context. That's why casual conversations turned stiff. Control slipped just a little, and anyone who's ever benefited from control going uncontested gets real nervous when it cracks. And you're standing there realizing something wild. You didn't lose your leverage by staying quiet. You built it. Every time you didn't react, you preserved credibility. Every time you didn't clap back, you let their words age. Every time you kept moving without explaining yourself, you allowed the truth to mature without interference. That defender didn't create belief. They activated it because belief was already there, dormant, waiting for permission to breathe. People already sensed you weren't the caricature they were fed. They just didn't feel safe saying it until someone else did first. Crowd psychology is fragile like that. Nobody wants to be the first domino. Everybody wants to follow one. And that person spoke up, and the dominoes started leaning. That's when panic shows its real face. Hushed side conversations, forced neutrality, statements that suddenly sound rehearsed. The vibe switches from confident to careful, from jokes to disclaimers, from everyone knows to allegedly. And you're not celebrating. You're observing. That's the difference. Celebration would imply surprise. Observation means you always knew this could happen. You've been collecting receipts mentally, not because you planned to use them, but because you understood patterns. You saw who talks when it's easy and who freezes when it's risky. You noticed who benefits from ambiguity and who needs clarity to breathe. The funny thing is, the more they look for evidence, the clearer your position becomes. Innocence ages well under scrutiny. Integrity doesn't rush. Lies sprint and still arrive breathless. They're uncomfortable because the spotlight flipped direction without warning. Public defense does that. It reassigns gravity in a room. Suddenly you're not the one centered by suspicion. You're centered by attention. Even silence draws eyes when expectations have been disrupted. Your calm is heavy. Your restraint unsettles people. They don't know what move you'll make because they can't project need onto you anymore. You're not asking for redemption. You're not chasing vindication. That lack of hunger short-circuits manipulation. And, there's power in realizing you don't need to perform pain to be believed. You're learning that reputation isn't controlled by volume. It's controlled by consistency. That's what confused them. They mistook your low noise for low weight. They didn't realize gravity doesn't announce itself. Every scramble for proof is another confession they never intended to make. People only fear evidence when evidence has the potential to contradict convenience. And convenience has been the currency that paid for your silence being misused. Something fundamental shifted when you didn't rush to defend yourself after being defended. That composure rewrote the hierarchy without a speech. It communicated something raw and deeply unsettling. Confidence that doesn't beg, presence that doesn't posture, strength that doesn't need a witness to exist. And standing right there, breathing steady, you're beginning to feel it settle in your bones. The understanding that being underestimated was never a disadvantage. It filtered out the fragile alliances. It exposed the borrowed confidence. It revealed who needs noise to survive and who doesn't. Their search continues, frantic, but controlled on the surface, while your stillness keeps doing the work that reactions never could, because stillness keeps amplifying things they hoped would fade. It's wild how silence turns into a mirror when people are forced to sit with it. They keep checking reactions, scanning the room, wondering who believes what, who clocked the shift, who quietly updated their opinion about you without saying it out loud. You notice the distance change. People who once leaned in with confidence start managing space differently. Conversations don't flow the same. Jokes don't land clean. There's too much awareness in the air. Every sentence feels measured, edited mid-thought, like they're scared the wrong wording could snap the tension back into focus. That's when it hits. You were never fighting individuals. You were up against a shared assumption. And once someone cracked that assumption publicly, it exposed how thin the whole thing really was. A stack of vibes pretending to be facts. A group agreement built on convenience instead of truth. The panic isn't loud. It's procedural. It looks like people pulling old files like they're auditing their own conscience. It looks like sudden interest in policies that never mattered before. It looks like folks revisiting timelines they ignored when judging felt easier than understanding. And you're standing there realizing how strange it feels to be validated without being loud. There's almost a disbelief in it, like your nervous system hasn't caught up yet. A part of you expected resistance, pushback, drama. Instead, there's this recalibration. People recalculating risk. You feel heavier, not in a bad way. Grounded. Presence takes on a physical quality when scrutiny switches sides. Your posture doesn't change, but the way others respond to it does. No rush, no scrambling. Breathing steady while other folks start adjusting their tone around you. They're realizing reputations don't collapse all at once. They erode in public, slowly, in front of witnesses. That's the part that scares them. No single moment to argue against, no big lie to disprove. Just a growing awareness that the picture they painted never fully matched reality. You catch the side glances, people testing each other, silent questions being asked without words. Who knew? Who believed? Who stayed quiet because it benefited them? Those questions bounce around the room, unanswered, uncomfortable. Something else settles in, too. The recognition that you didn't just survive the narrative, you outlasted it. Time stayed on your side while noise burned itself out. You didn't rush to defend your character because character doesn't sprint. It walks, steady, through contradiction. The irony is hard to miss. The people demanding clarity are the same ones who thrived in ambiguity when it favored them. Context mattered less back then. Nuance felt unnecessary. And yet here they are, suddenly scholars of detail, experts in fairness, champions of balance. Your restraint keeps rewriting the math. Panic feeds on reaction, and you're offering none. That composure forces everyone else to do the emotional labor they avoided earlier. It forces reflection without entertainment. Accountability without spectacle. There's an internal shift happening too. A quiet confidence replacing the old tension. The realization that being defended publicly didn't elevate you. It revealed where you already stood. You didn't move up. The fog just cleared. Eyes linger longer than usual. Conversations resume with caution. Your name carries a different weight when it circulates. Not explosive, dense. People lower their voices without realizing why. Every attempt to gather evidence keeps underlining the same thing. The absence of wrongdoing doesn't need drama to hold shape. It just exists, solid, unbothered. immune to spin. And standing right there, awareness expanding, presence solidifying, the understanding grows deeper that power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just rearranges the room and keeps breathing while everyone else adjusts around it. Because once the room rearranges itself around you, it doesn't snap back the way it used to. Even when things look normal again, they aren't. There's a residue left behind, a memory in the air. People remember moments like this, even when they pretend they don't. You start seeing hesitation where confidence used to live. Messages get drafted and deleted before they ever reach you. Invitations feel more calculated. The casual disrespect fades and gets replaced with politeness that's just a little too intentional. That's awareness trying to disguise itself as manners. What really messes with them is that the defense didn't come from you. If you had spoken up, they could have framed it as emotional, defensive, self-serving. But someone else did it. Someone with nothing to gain by lying. Someone who didn't need your approval. That's the detail that keeps looping in their heads late at night. Credibility transfers differently when it's unsolicited. That's why the scramble feels weirdly personal. It's not about proving you wrong anymore. It's about proving they weren't careless. People hate confronting the idea that they might have misjudged someone publicly. That guilt pushes folks into detective mode, digging for anything that justifies past behavior. And meanwhile, you're not spiraling. You're regulated. That calm isn't passive. It's disciplined. It's the calm of someone who already processed the pain privately and doesn't need to bleed publicly to be believed. Notice how nobody's really confronting you directly. They circle, they speculate, they compare notes with each other. Direct engagement would mean risk. Indirect investigation feels safer. That tells you everything about who's actually confident in their position. You're also realizing something about power dynamics. Power doesn't always belong to the loudest person in the room. It belongs to the one who can sit inside uncertainty without panicking. The one who doesn't rush to clean up discomfort. The one who lets tension teach. People are sensing that you're not trying to win them over anymore. There's no pitch in your voice, no campaign energy, just presence. And that's unsettling, because influence without effort exposes how much of the social game has always been performance. The story people told about you needed participation to survive. Once you stopped feeding it, it started starving. Someone speaking up was just the final nudge that made everyone notice the silence underneath the noise. Reputations don't flip overnight, but gravity sets in quietly. When your name comes up, conversations slow. People choose words more carefully. No one rushes to label anymore because labels feel risky when they've already been proven slippery. You feel it internally too. That subtle straightening of the spine. Not pride, clarity. The certainty that you didn't imagine the disrespect, didn't overreact, didn't misread the room. Validation arrived without fireworks, without applause, and somehow that made it heavier, more real. They're still collecting fragments, still revisiting the past like it might suddenly confess something new. Evidence hunting becomes routine. Over time, it turns into fatigue. That exhaustion doesn't come from effort. It comes from fighting reality. And you're standing in that space where the noise died down, but the awareness stayed, breathing evenly. Letting the moment keep unfolding without rushing it. Feeling how influence settles without announcement. How truth doesn't need to chase acceptance. How presence alone keeps reshaping the atmosphere in ways nobody can easily reverse. Because awareness doesn't leave once it takes residence. It just sits there quietly, watching everything interact with it. And you can tell when people are aware because they start second-guessing instincts they used to trust without thinking. That automatic judgment, gone. That confidence in assumptions, shaky. Every move gets a mental double-check first. You hear it in their voices, slight pauses where there used to be certainty, sentences that start strong and trail off into qualifiers, people correcting themselves mid-thought, like, maybe, or from what I saw anyway. That's caution creeping in. Caution shows up when people know the ground they're standing on might not be solid. They're realizing that narratives age, and not all of them age well. The one they ran with started showing cracks once light touched it from another angle. And the thing about light is, it doesn't argue. It reveals, quietly, relentlessly. You've been watching how alliances shift too. Not dramatically, subtle stuff. Who checks in, who stays quiet, who suddenly wants to keep things neutral. Neutrality often shows up when sides start costing something. That tells you which connections were built on convenience instead of conviction. And there's a strange calm inside you as you watch this happen. Not satisfaction, not revenge. Something steadier. Like the nervous system finally realizing it's safe to stop bracing. The tension you carried while being misunderstood starts loosening without you forcing it to. People underestimate how loud internal peace can be. It radiates. It disrupts patterns. You don't have to explain it or defend it. Others feel it and adjust accordingly.